Hey, this is Zac.
And I'm Clint, and we wanted to thank Exo-terra for sponsoring this episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.
Exo-terra is the industry leader in glass terrarium enclosures, and we are a big fan of getting to see the species we work with both at home and at the university.
We utilize Exo-terra caging here at Metazotics, and in addition to top quality terrariums, Exo-terra offers an array of heating options, lighting, supplements, decor, and truthfully anything needed or wanted when keeping reptiles.
Thank you, Exo-terra, for supporting Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Zac here, as always, with brother from another mother, Clint. How you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, buddy. Hanging in there.
I'm hanging in there too.
What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Yeah, I am. We're at the point in the semester where it's midterms. So, like, my different roles at the school are all crashing together. The administrator gig, the professor gig. Students are where they normally are at midterms. So, most of them are okay. But no. And then I am leaving a week from Friday on my biology of snakes, which, by the way, may be my favorite class I've taught in the past decade, because I got 31 students in this class, which is crazy. And I'm just going like fire hose, full blown, hardcore. I'm teaching at a graduate level, and the undergrads are keeping up, which is pretty awesome. So, but I was able to work into it a herping trip for spring break. So we're going to South Florida. We're going to be running around the Everglades. Then we're going to go up the middle part of Florida. And then Route 27, if you know what that is. If you're in Florida, you know what that is. Hit the cane fields, do all that kind of jazz, and then end up at OCIC, the Oregon Center for Indigo Conservation. We're going to be putting in some new enclosures for them and starting a field effort to document the herps on their property. But I've got to plan that whole thing on top of everything else, get all the pieces moving, get the airplane tickets bought. And that's been fun. And then snakes in the background, always in the background. I finally reached the point today where I was like, I've got to bring them out of brumation. And this is the first time in the past 5 years I was like, yeah. That's going to add another thing. But it's okay. We got this. So, anywho, and then the snakes are up at school. We've got these hognose snakes that we're sharing now that you had at your place. And just to let the listeners know, I put them into these enclosures, which is also serving as their quarantine. And I thought, what the hell? I'll throw the male with the female. And I think it took him less than 30 seconds to be like, female. And he was courting her immediately. So that's pretty cool. But that's what I have going on. And what do you have?
I got a lot, bud. I got a lot. Mm-hmm. So, if you're a listener that's been kind of keeping up with the episodes as they come out, you know that we're opening our second shop. And that happens this coming Saturday. Actually, by the time this episode hits, it will have been, will already be open. But for timelines, the flooring was supposed to be done about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks before it finally got done. Now, we had already locked in what our grand opening date was. It's advertised out there. I mean, it's, we can't change that. Or if we did, it would be bad.
Yeah.
So in short, I got 7 days. 7 days to build an entire store. Now, we've got, a few people helping, obviously. My wife Wendy's all over it. Ox is, Ox is no longer an employee at the Chandler location. Ox is it's all Henderson at this point. He's over there kicking butt with me. Had some friends, Andrew, who's a friend and listener of the show. He's come over and helped me, as well as several others. But it's coming along. It's we've still got 3 full days, I guess, and we should be there. But still, lots to do, obviously. And it's, a lot of phone calls of, hey, sign guys, when's this sign getting put up? Oh, well, we it should be another 2 or 3 weeks. No,
Yeah.
it's not going to work for me. I let you guys know this is my grand opening date. I need it done by then. Oh, well, that wasn't shared with us. Not a problem. I need it done. So now that's getting done tomorrow. So
Yeah.
And even the flooring guys. I mean, I walked in with Ox, and I'm finding myself through some of this. I don't like being aggressive if I don't have to be, because we're not small guys.
No.
And so I don't want to be like a bully, you know what I mean, or be seen that way. But man, like the flooring guys had me hot. I was at this point, and I'm coming across in a way I don't even mean to because I'm so angry at it. And I mean, the owner of the flooring company, I think he comes up to my Adam's apple. So me just being heated already, I didn't mean to come across like that, but Ox made a comment when we walked in. He goes, "Did you see the look in the flooring guy's eyes?" Because they already knew how mad I was, and now they were wrapping up for the day. Oh, we're going to be back to finish it tomorrow. It's already been done, But so, anyways, that's in that's in progress right now, and it's actually going well for us. And the response. So we ran. Here's some market pieces for you guys real fast. So we run Facebook ads whenever we have events, and I'm getting better and better at how I do this, and I kind of target the area. For our events, I do 2 targets. I target our immediate area within a certain mile radius, and then nationally I'll target whoever likes these things, reptiles, blah, 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 blah. And I do that because when we run an event, it's online as well as in store, and we hit both. Well, with this grand opening, I didn't target online at all because everything's not on sale like that through the entire system. It's just that grand opening for the Henderson location. And so we did do some kind of geographical targeting, and whoa. So when we run this before, we would get like 300 responses, whether that be going or interested. And it's like, that's, over 200, pretty good. We're going to have a good day. We're like at 450 responses to this so far. I mean, it's incredible. And it's like, we're a little nervous because the showroom's a third of the size of the Chandler showroom. Because, I mean, we got such a massive place here. Like, I don't know how we're going to fit any of these people in here, but we're doing well, man. And here at the Chandler shop, again, we've got, sorry, side note. I had to do this. I have learned that Ox's mother listens to the podcast for the first 20 minutes. So with that in mind, I want to say he's doing great. And hi, Heather. So, okay.
Nice.
Now we got that in. Over here at Chandler, Corey is doing well in the nursery, kind of finding her rhythm. And honestly, she's kind of been thrown to the wolves because Ox got like about a week and a half, 2 weeks to train her. And then, I've had to yank him for everything we're doing. And I keep telling her, listen, give me another week and I'm going to come spend some time with you back here. But just keep hanging in there. You're doing well. And again, so that's going great. I've got some snakes coming in. As far as the collection, everything's warmed up. We've got, I've started pairing Asians already. Really, I've started pairing anything that I can throw together and not have to worry about and just cohab because so much is going on to try to time sheds and all this. It's more difficult. So that is happening. But I've got snakes coming in from 2 sources, both listeners of the show, one of which, Kevin Pollock, is sending me several animals, including what we're talking about today.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, 5 of those on the way. Kevin, I thought it was funny. We're talking about everything that's going on right now. The show, this, the shop opening up. I'm prepping for Tinley at the same time. that all this is going on. And he says, when do you sleep? And the truth is, the moment I sit down, gone out, dead to the world.
I do the same thing. That's funny. My wife was talking to me because the second it's not, if my back can hit a structure and I zonk for 30 seconds, boom, gone. I've reached that age where that happens. I distinctly remember being in high school and my dad would do that after school. And I would think, why does he do that? I know why he did that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But my wife was like, are you okay? Like, what is wrong with you? You're sleeping a lot. And I was like, actually, I'm not. I'm sleeping from like 10 o'clock to 5 out of pure exhaustion. And then I'm getting my ass up and moving.
Yes.
So, yeah, no.
Same,
That's
buddy.
fine.
But
okay. Well, cool.
All right, man. Do you want to roll in with the science update?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the science update. Science update, as always, brought to us by Rare Genetics, Inc. We will be having Ben on as a guest in the not too distant future for those listening. And I have a cool subject that I want to talk to him about with genetics, but we'll keep that as a teaser for the future. As always, get them their sheds, the product of all of our efforts, plug in the sheds. We now know, what we brought them on last episode. They have, or one of the previous episodes, they have the tests now and they're still cranking away at these morph tests. So, the more material the colubrid community gives RGI, the higher likelihood that we'll have more tests coming out in the not too distant future. So please, by all means, be doing that. I do need to give one update before I talk about this week's book. This is the last book I'm going to talk about. I have some journal articles lined up for the next episodes, but I got some feedback that people like the books because they can go out and buy the books. So one more book. But I do want to talk a little bit about the products of the auction, the product of the auction at Colubrid Fest, which then led to our inspiration to create the CCR Conservation Corps, which is our nonprofit. I met with the team in Iowa for the upcoming project, and I'm just going to say it one more time. I have survived the purge of funding and still have some, and I am actually most excited for this coming summer to do the snake project. And I know the focus is on hognose, but we talked about what we're going to be doing, and holy mother of goodness. It's going to start in April. So those of you who contributed to that, the grad students, I met with the two students that are going to be doing this for their master's thesis. One is named Paige, one is named Alyssa. Paige is going to be doing telemetry work with both Western and Eastern hognose snakes. Alyssa is going to be looking at the entire snake community on the Sand Prairie. And then I have another student who actually attended Colubrid Fest, Tyler, who was my undergrad and stayed on for grad school. And he is going to be working all summer in Iowa. So we are going to be doing some hardcore colubrid-based research funded straight from, efforts that are associated with our podcast. If you want to contribute to that, by all means, hit up the CCR Conservation Corps. We have abilities for you to donate to that. But no, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty. I'm just going to say I do a lot of meetings with my job. It's like death by meeting some days. And the meeting I had yesterday with Josh, Jim, and Don I left that meeting like I could have flipped a car. That's how excited I was talking about what we're going to do and the objectives. And I mentioned the Fitch book, which, if you've listened to that episode and saw me gush over that book and said, like, one of my goals is to write this book 10 years from now. And they're totally on board. So for that particular community. So lots of awesome science to come. And we'll be doing updates as that happens. But mid-April, which is not that long from now, it's mid-February. So basically 2 months from now, my students are there. So we're gathering data and we're putting our money where our mouth is, which is pretty cool. Okay. The book for today is relatively cheap. It's somewhere between 20 and 30 bucks. And I think it's closer to 20 than it is 30. I rarely read books now. I listen to most of my books because I don't have time to sit. But I bought this one because the author is Dr. Rick Shine. And if you are a snake nerd that knows the science part of snakedom, you know who Rick Shine is. Rick Shine is basically the snake ecologist for Australia. And he had a site at Fog Dam in northern Australia where there were literally, before cane toads got there, hundreds to thousands of water pythons and studied the living snot out of those snakes. But he's getting older, and he's basically writing books that are kind of memoirs. And I got this one. Here it is, Snakes Without Borders. It's not that thick, and it's stories. And what I love about this book is that you hear about what it was like to do the project. You hear about his interaction with students, which I have all the time. You hear about why he did it, and I love the reason why Shine did this. He tells everybody throughout the book. You pick up the vibe. He does the science that he does because he's making his inner 10-year-old happy. And I think that scientists don't ever talk about stuff that way. I'm going to flat out tell you the reason why I'm so geeked to go do this hognose work is like 13-year-old Zach's like, you're getting paid to do that? Like, holy hell. Got to honor the 13-year-old version of yourself. But I highly recommend this book because it's just a fun, easy read. Some of the books that I have recommended, they're not easy to read, or it can be a little bit boring. This has that human factor put in. And so I haven't made it all the way through, but the chapters that I have read, there's a really interesting chapter in here about the python skin trade of all things, and how harvesting hundreds of snakes a year for that is actually, Dr. Shine did the research to see, can the reticulated pythons handle this level of collection? And it's an interesting read because you would think snake conservation guy is going to say they can't handle it. There's no way. And his science clearly demonstrated that the reticulated pythons can handle that level of take. And then what he gets into with it, which as a conservation biologist, this is something I try to get across to my students all the time, which is you can't be the bleeding heart. We can't possibly hurt the pythons. Whether we like it or not, the pythons being a resource leads to the pythons being protected, because this now is the way that people make a living. So if you go out and just wipe the pythons off the planet, we don't have pythons anymore, and then those people don't have jobs. So because there's an economic value associated with the pythons, it's not the value we think of, but it makes them valuable to the communities in Southeast Asia, which then means that they want to make sure that they persist. So it's real, I call it boots on the ground conservation, which is my favorite kind, which is when you're just right up in it and you're kind of looking at ugly truths, if that makes sense. And then there's other chapters that are cool. There's another chapter in there about this island where off the coast of China, where the Hashiko pit vipers live, which has the highest density, or one of the highest densities of snakes per meter. They calculated it out. I believe that there are between 1 and 5 snakes per every meter, and they're all venomous, and they all can hurt you badly. But they do this crazy, very interesting behavior where they're boom bust feeders. So twice a year, just like here in North America, Asia has neotropical migrants, birds that fly from the cold northern part of China and Russia down into the warm part of Southeast Asia in the fall, and then they make that trip back up in the spring. And this is the 2 times that these snakes get to eat. And it was really fun reading, that chapter, because Dr. Shine talks about like hardcore science stuff, and then he talks about like, but at the same time, I didn't want to crouch down because getting bit in the groin by a pit viper is a really bad day. And there's so you don't get that kind of statement in a freaking peer-reviewed paper. And every now and then, it's just fun to read how scientists do the science that they do, and that's what this book's all about. So, nice. If you're in college, if you're in high school, and you're thinking, "Do I want to be a herpetologist?" I recommend these kind of books because they really do, if they're written the right way. Not all of them are written this way, but this one definitely is. It gives you an insight into what it is and how you actually do the science, because it's not always the way you think. I know if you would have told me when I was in high school, yeah, really good Python research involves killing hundreds of reticulated pythons, I know I would have looked at you and been like, what the hell are you talking about? But at the same time, you can get a lot of data, whether we like it or not, from a animal that's been harvested. So might as well get the data because the animal's being harvested, whether we like it or not. So anyway, so it kind of gives that perspective. So that's my 2 science updates, the update of the science we will be doing, and then this book. And then because of biology of snakes, that class, holy mother, I have read so many scientific papers on snakes. It is every spare second I am making PowerPoint slides for that class. And we are just now getting to the advanced snakes. But mark my words, when we get into the advanced snakes and we get into all the colubrids and colubroids, I'm double dipping and I'm purposely reading a ton of articles and I'm making slides that I can then show on our podcast during the science update. So two birds, one stone. Efficiency. Okay. Anyway, that's my science update. What do you have going on with the market?
All right. So it's going to be an interesting market update because I'm going to have to go in a few different directions here. But I want to start off by, again, thanking Show Me Reptiles, ShowMeSnakes.com, Mickey and his team. Obviously, they are the ones that sponsor our market update, as well as bring us Colubrid Fest. So big shout out to them as always. So we're seeing the upward trend. Here's what, so far, the weekends are where it's popping again. It's still not super busy throughout the week. In that, in the retail location, I am seeing a lot of online activity. I'm getting a lot of responses. I say a lot, increased level of responses. And it's funny because it kind of contradicts in a way what I was expecting because of outside influences right now. And I'm going to go into that again. But we'll just say, for the most part right now, shows are doing well. Tax season is here. Tax money has started to come in. Shows have picked up. In-stores picked up. Online has picked up. The online is what I was surprised to see as fast as what I'm seeing, right now. But I'm going to sound like a broken record, everyone. You really will want to get your ads placed. Get any animals that you do have that you're looking to move. Get them loaded. Get them, out there. Get good pictures, because this is whenever there's money in people's pockets and there's not as many snakes on the table, so to speak. So, this is whenever you can definitely take advantage of it. I want to give a shout out again. I mentioned this on our last episode, but I want to give a shout out to Exo-terra, our show sponsor, because of the bulbs they have coming out. I was talking to Logan, who is our primary contact out there for the show. Thanks again, Logan, for all you do, for the show, for Metazotics. You guys are great. But those the bulbs that they've got coming out, the very high output T5s, these are all the buzz. If you get on any of the lighting groups, they're talking about these, and I'm yet to get them in the shop. I'm dying to. I know that there's one distributor out there that just got them here in the States, but the distributor that I have to go through doesn't have them yet, or doesn't have them listed. So Logan's looking into that for me, but these things are going to be top notch. So, I really want to get those out here. So wanted to mention that. But okay, so what we have going on right now, and how I'm seeing this play out, I guess I have to premise it with this. In order for me to truly do the market update justice, I'm going to have to address things I mentioned a little bit last episode, but I'm going to have to go into a little more now. And I want to say that our listeners know we stay away from politics on this show. We don't get involved in that. And for full transparency, I am not a Democrat or a Republican. I dislike them both equally. So I'm not into politics. I'm very down the middle. So, if you wonder where I'm going with this, just know that's my political stance, pretty down the middle. So, okay. We obviously have a lot going on at the federal level right now.
Yeah, we do.
And it's causing a lot of turmoil. And I'm going to come back to back to conservation and that funding, because it actually is going to tie into that. So we all have heard of all of the terminations that took place. We see them posted. We see that it's not the IRS where we wish they would just can everybody. It's a lot of places that we didn't expect it to hit. And it's because it was kind of approached with an axe and not a scalpel. I don't think there's any of us who are going to deny that the government needs to trim waste. That's for sure. But I think it's the approach that kind of has all of us, or many of us on both sides, thinking, there's probably a better way this should have been done. Now, that, as I said last episode, is causing some tension, causing some nervousness. Now, there are some jobs that the people got hired right back after a few weeks. This is in certain segments or for certain reasons, and that is a positive thing, and I'm very happy for that. However, it causes even more nervousness because it gives the message, okay, so they don't know what they're doing. And so that back and forth is going to continue to deteriorate consumer confidence. The reason we are not experiencing that yet is taxes. As while people still have a lot of money in their pocket, we're going to experience a positive, what we'll call retail environment for the next couple months. Sorry about that, guys. We're going to experience that. Well, it's my fear is come maybe May. That's when it's going to potentially hit us. That's when we're going to see a potential slowdown. So I hope I'm wrong on that. This is, again, a guy who's opening a second retail location. I want people to still want to spend their money. But that is definitely something that has me on watch. And normally I don't like to give a negative viewpoint on markets out there, but I have to, I want to be honest with what we're seeing. And again, hopefully I'm wrong on that. We'll see what comes about. But I will say I have no fear over the next 8 weeks. The next 8 weeks, tax season is still going to be tax season, unless something I don't see coming blows up at the federal level. It's probably going to be what it's going to be. Now, I want to go back real quick, and this will tie into what you said, Zac. So we know that a lot of federal funding got yanked from a lot of scientific research, scientific projects, scientific grants. I mean, just boom. We're even seeing where universities aren't wanting to take in PhD students because of the funding issues. That sucks. And that really, I mean, I can't see where that's a positive, in my opinion. But hey, we're into conservation. We're into, the further advancement in the studies of these animals. So obviously, maybe we're skewed. Maybe we're biased. But if you're like us and you're skewed and you're biased and you do want to continue to be able to positively impact conservation, that's one of the great things about the CCR Conservation Corp. It's not federally funded. It's that money can't be yanked from someone else. Any of the money that gets raised and put into that account, into that fund, it's going to go to science research and to these grants and to conservation. So please continue to donate, continue to help us, because it looks like there's a lot of conservation money out there that's going to be drying up. in ways that we didn't anticipate or like. So hopefully to the listeners, that wasn't too political either way. Again, try not to be that, try not to do that. But it's just with what we've got going on out there right now, there's some nervousness, whether it's on the science side or the market side. So,
and I just have to say one thing. I'm saying one thing. If you were impacted by the purge, I'm sorry, and I hope you're okay. And I just want you to know we're thinking of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely.
So, okay. With that being said, are we done with our updates?
I think so. I think that's pretty quick.
This was a land speed record. We're normally at 45 minutes, and we're at 30.
I think we're really excited to get our guest on. So
yeah, all right.
I'd like to introduce him. I just want to say, thank you to ReptiChip. ReptiChip sponsors the guest portion of our episode, and looking forward to working with some new products that ReptiChip is sending our way to test out. So, some exciting stuff there. But yeah,
I'm stoked about that as well. Okay, I'm gonna bring him to the stage. All righty. Tonight we have the one, the only Roy Blodgett, another repeat guest. I am no longer going to say what number of repeat guests this is, so I don't get myself in trouble.
Don't want to get in trouble again, huh?
Yeah, no. Sorry, Kayla, again.
She got fiery, huh?
Anywho, but Roy needs no introduction. Co-host of Project Herpetoculture, and then a fellow South American snake enthusiast. That's my group. I don't really think there's many people in herpetoculture like I do South American species. You don't hear people say that often. So I have mad respect for that aspect of your keeping, Roy. And then Spilotes, we had him on before. So if you haven't listened to that episode and you want to know all things Spilotes sulphureus, we got to actually meet. What's his name?
Handsome boy.
Handsome boy. At Pomona when we were out there. But tonight we're going to be talking about a species we've had people reach out to, or genus that we've had people reach out to us about multiple times, and that's Phreanax. We're going to be doing. Did I butcher that?
Just a little bit, but it was good. Right. I mean, I don't know how to correctly pronounce it either. So
hey,
I say
Phrynonax,
like
I can read it.
Phrynonax, but
Phrynonax. There we
who
go.
Knows? There you go.
But
bird
this is a fun one.
Snakes.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Bird eating snakes. Yeah.
See, we're gonna do a little bit of taxonomy talk tonight, a little bit of natural history talk. Did you find one of these?
I did, yeah.
In Costa Rica? Yeah, I thought so. So a little bit about that, and then just all things herping, because Roy has actually bred a species of Phrynonax. I have to like really think about that to say that. That most people haven't, and we'll save that for when we get to it. So yeah, Roy, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right.
We're looking forward to having you on. Before we start, can we tell the audience like what cool thing we've got coming up in May?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How awesome this is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to the Reptile Talks in Anaheim in May. And what we've decided to do is we are actually, Zac and I are flying in a few days early. We're flying in somewhere in Northern California. We haven't decided.
I don't know where.
San Francisco, Oakland, or whatever the other one was you guys said.
Sacramento.
We're meeting up with Roy, with Kayla, and I think possibly Lucas. Is it right?
Grad student Lucas. I finally get to see him, though he's like family.
So excited, because what we are then doing is taking a few days and traveling from Northern California down to Anaheim in field herping for days the entire way down.
Yes.
That is going to be so
I am excited
amazing. I mean, like, I'm sure that you guys are, excited that, that'll be fun. But for Zac and I, we're herping California.
Yeah, we are. No, the hillbillies are coming your way.
Yes. We're going to be the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yes. Great.
Yep. No.
So excited.
I know it's not a colubrid, but all you had to say was rubber boa, and I was like, done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I got a pretty
There we
good spot for those. I'm optimistic that I can get you a rubber boa, but I'm really excited. It's gonna be good, man, to show you guys
nice.
around a little bit. And I'm pretty passionate about this area, so I'm excited to share it with you guys and hopefully get you stoked.
Well, we had such a great time at Pomona. You know, it's like when I came home, I said, you know, we were there for several days and we never turned the TV on.
No, we didn't.
You know, it was all conversation. And just, I mean, you know, camaraderie. It was great. So, yeah,
Good
looking
time.
forward to this too.
Yeah. Okay. So, are we going to jump into snakes, or we did your background? I know we did your background really well in the previous episode.
I think we should need to touch on it at least.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a little background quick.
Sure.
Okay. So a quick background. I've been keeping herps pretty much my whole life. I was born into a household. My dad kept reptiles back in the early 90s, mid 90s. And first pet snake was a California king that I ended up having until I was 18 years old. I got that snake when I was 3. And, you know, into my teenage years, I was really passionate about neotropical colubrids, particularly the big guys like Drymarchon and Spilotes, also Phrynonax, although back then they were Sustes, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then I had about a 10-year hiatus away from herpetoculture, away from the keeping side. And in my kind of my 20s, basically, and focused more on field herping and kind of naturalist skills, general ecology stuff, and then came back to herpetoculture kind of more from that lens. And so that was in 2018, I think, that I came back to herpetoculture. And so now I'm keeping a handful of species, primarily South American snakes and a couple of obscure South American lizards. And I'm pretty focused on naturalistic husbandry approach. I like to kind of get it really complicated and create nice complicated habitats for the animals and try to replicate where they're from as well as I can. And really that's because I'm really driven by seeing behavior in my animals. And and observing them. That's like what gets me stoked. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Hopefully that's a sufficient background. Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So from here on out, because I can't say the genus name, we're just going to call them bird snakes. Is that cool?
Great. That's perfect.
All
I
right.
love that. Yeah.
Cool. So
I'm pro that.
We're speaking good language. All right. So so these snakes are it's funny. Before we get into them, I have gotten so close to the trigger being pulled on these things. I mean, I'm talking like 10, 15 times.
Yeah.
And I just haven't done it yet. And it's because to me, they're kind of an upper echelon. They're just badass. And I want to make sure when I inevitably get them, I have the time and the resources to give them to do them right. That makes sense. But then we were at Pomona and you had a bunch and I was like, so anyway, but let's just kind of, if you don't mind, the 100,000 foot view for people who may not know anything about neotropical bird snakes. If you could just kind of give like the natural history ecology of these snakes, and then we'll talk about the crazy paint jobs, because that's what's really cool. So like, where do you find them? What do they do? And then what is a North American equivalent that we have for them?
Okay. I'll do my best. So, so these guys, they're a new world, endemic, of course. And the genus ranges from kind of southern Mexico all the way down to Bolivia. So they've got a pretty broad range throughout Latin America. And currently there are, I think, 3 species represented and accepted, but I think that there are probably a few more in there, as well. It's a genus that needs some review and some revision, in my opinion. And in terms of their kind of ecological niche, you know, I think of them as kind of a lowland rainforest species. They're very tolerant to disturbed habitats, as far as I'm aware, and so you'll often see people posting pictures of them up in like their rafters of their houses and, you know, the jungle lodges and stuff down in Costa Rica and that kind of thing. But they're highly arboreal. And as the, you know, common name implies, they are bird eating specialists. They will also eat rodents and stuff like that, but they really are, you know, a bird specialist, in my opinion. And they also consume a lot of eggs. So, you know, in terms of like how that translates to the different species that are represented, you know, I think that there's basically, like I said, there's probably 3 species currently accepted. I think that we have 3 species in herpetoculture, but one of those is currently, you know, it's 2 species masquerading under one name, in my opinion. So the majority of the species that you're going to be seeing in herpetoculture are the commonly called the Neotropical bird snake or the Costa Rican bird snake. And that is, as the name implies, from Costa Rica. I think that the original bloodlines that showed up in the U.S. came from Quetzal Dwyer and the Parque Reptilandia crew down there.
Cool.
And they are super polymorphic, cool snakes, come in a bunch of different colors. They get pretty big, up, you know, 7 feet for an adult is not out of the realm of possibility. And then we have another variety that's also just labeled under that same name of the kind of Neotropical bird snake that is usually in black and yellow in appearance. And I think that most of the animals in the US right now originally came from black pearl. And this is a species that I think is an animal that's, I think, is likely a separate species. I refer to them as northern bird snakes just because arbitrarily they're the northernmost form that occurs in kind of southern Mexico down into western Honduras. So we got those 2 guys. And then if we move further south, you get into southern Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador has its own species called Phrynonax shropshirei. And this species is also black and yellow in appearance, but is not currently represented in U.S. herpetoculture. And there's a whole bunch of confusion around that because when these other black and yellow ones originally showed up on the U.S. scene, a lot of people were labeling them as shropshirei when they're actually something else entirely. So that species again is not currently represented. It's a really spectacular species though. And, I highly recommend people go on iNaturalist or something and just take a look at the photos of that one, 'cause it's a really gorgeous animal. And then moving from there, we go into kind of, you know, mainland, Amazon basin, South America. We go over the Andes and into the Amazon basin, and then up into the Guyana Shield has its own species. And this one is Phrynonax sexcarinatus. Up until pretty recently, this species was called Phrynonax polylepis, but there was some name order hierarchy stuff that happened, and it was redescribed. So this species does also occur in herpetoculture, but right now is pretty rare. It'll show up occasionally on Suriname shipments. And in fact, there's a couple floating around on classifieds and stuff right now that I've noticed. But up to this point, it's the rarest of the 3 species in U.S. herpetoculture.
Yeah, and who bred those?
Oh yeah, so those are the ones I bred. Those are the ones that I had. Yeah. So I think that the last year I got 2 clutches. I just have 1 pair of those. Well, actually, right now I have a lot of pairs of those, but originally I just had 1 pair of adults of those, and both wild caught, and got 2 clutches. The female dropped them. They both are hatched perfect hatch rate. So I think that those may be the first in the US that were hatched of that particular species. But I mean, it's very possible that it's happened at some point, in the distant past, but at least in recent years, those are the only ones I know of. And the exciting thing about those is that the male that produced the babies that I hatched is a really weird example of that species, in that he's bright red, whereas basically every other example of that species that I've ever seen is either kind of an olive green or a chocolate brown color. So he's a weirdo, and it seems to be some sort of morphotype. I don't know much about what kind of morph that would even be classified as. If someone has an idea out there and wants to talk to me about it, then I welcome it. But it does seem to be heritable, because roughly half of the offspring that I've hatched seem to have inherited that red, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
What
Right.
What kind of, we're going to talk a lot about snakes, but I kind of like to talk about you on it too. What geared you towards the Neotropical bird eaters? I mean,
yeah.
I obviously we see them. Hey, those are pretty, but you made the jump to actually move in that direction. So how did that occur?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's there's a lot of reasons. So I love Spilotes. That's kind of my flagship thing. Everyone, that knows me knows I'm into the Spilotes.
Then take a step further back for me. How'd that happen? I guess, well, with South American snakes, like what took you in that direction as a whole? Because
that's okay. So what's the deal with South American snakes for me? I think has a lot to do with just as a naturalist and as a biodiversity nerd, the Amazon region has this kind of like mystical reverence for me. It's like I haven't had the chance to get down there yet. I really need to go, but I just think of that region as being just so mysterious and interesting. There's so many different species down there. And it's still relatively poorly studied compared to some of the other biodiversity hotspots in the world. And so there's still, tons of new species being described and all that kind of stuff happening in that region, which is also a large region, as well. But I think that has a lot to do with it. It just it's just this kind of, enigmatic region. And then coming out of that, Spilotes sulphureus is this kind of enigmatic snake that for me really embodies a lot of the qualities of that region, where it's like this big, gnarly colubrid that wasn't super well known, still isn't super well known or studied, but is at the same time, like, it's kind of shocking that it's not more well known, because it's this colubrid that gets, maybe up to 12 feet long, easily gets up to 10 feet long, regularly gets up to that big, super polymorphic, has a big old impressive threat display where they inflate their throat. So there's all these qualities of Spilotes that, I think, especially for me as a teenager, when I first started keeping them, we're just like, this is a badass snake, this big old honking colubrid that puffs up, and, so there's all of that. And then, getting back to kind of Phrynonax, it's like, they're kind of like the little cousins of the Spilotes for me. They bear a lot of similarities. They are, related, but they're a lot smaller, which is great, because while I wish I could keep, 5 pairs of Spilotes sulphureus, I just can't, because they're huge snakes and they take a ton of room. And, it's like you saw Handsome Boy is an almost 11-foot long snake, and it's hard to do a snake like that justice. But, a 5-foot long Phrynonax that weighs, a tenth of what that Spilotes does, it's a lot easier to be able to provide that a good quality of life. And so that's part of it. I also think that they just have a lot of interesting quirks. They're like I said, the polymorphism is really interesting about them. They go through an ontogenetic color change, much like Spilotes. So they start out, these heavily patterned, kind of cryptically patterned babies that almost look like like an eyelash viper or like some of the neotropical snail-eating snakes. They're pretty, nondescript, and then they can grow into these really colorful, impressive big snakes. They're also sexually dimorphic, which is really cool. And it's a dimorphism that's kind of unusual, which is that the males in adult Phrynonax are heavily keeled in their scalation, and the females lack keels completely. And so if you have a pair of adults, it's really easy to sex them just even visually because the keeling is so obvious. So those are some of the things that draw me to them. And then the other thing is I think that they're actually pretty straightforward in terms of care. I think that they can sometimes have a reputation for being a little bit finicky. And I think that there's maybe just a couple little quirks that people are doing wrong with them, that if they adjusted, they'd probably have a lot more success. But even that said, there's a lot of people, more and more people are keeping Phrynonax, and it seems like they're getting more and more popular, which is great to see. There's a handful of people here in the US. Jason Hood, of course, is kind of the pioneer in some ways. And then John Loughman over at Palm Beach Colubrids. Those guys are both producing a lot of the Costa Rican species. And like I mentioned before, John over at Black Pearl is producing these nice black and yellow northern animals as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things about them that are cool and that they've got going for them, I guess, in my opinion.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Good question, Clint.
What do we want to start talking about? How to take care of these bad boys?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I
have one thing I do want to do real quick.
Yeah.
One more nerdy thing, and then we'll hop into the care, because I do think this is important, because I got confused about 2 years ago trying to figure out what the hell these were. Mm-hmm. And that is that the taxonomy of these guys is a little bit of a pain in the butt if you go down that path, because they were in a genus we don't recognize anymore. But if you look at the older lit, Phrynonax wasn't really present, so you're going to miss all this information. So if you don't mind just doing like a quick, let's talk about Sutsi. I can't say that.
Yeah. And
I'm very happy this genus went away, because it's one of the worst genera to say that existed. So anyway.
So formerly and for a really long time, they were classified as Sustes. That's kind of the bulk of their kind of tenure within, modern herpetology. They were referred to as Sustes. And I think it was in the, I don't know, maybe around, I want to say right around 2005 or something like that. Or no, it was later than that, probably like 2010, something like that, they were elevated to their own genus, and Phrynonax became a thing. So before, they were under this genus Sustes, and they were actually grouped alongside what's now Spilotes sulphureus. And so back, when I like I said, when I was a teenager keeping these things, I was keeping at the time Sustes postsolanatus and Sustes sulphureus. And now, 15 years or 18 years later, I'm keeping Spilotes sulphureus, and then I'm keeping Sustes or Phrynonax sexcarinatus and Phrynonax postsolanatus. So it's all totally different. And that does make it confusing, but I would say that, if you're someone who's interested in digging into the old literature on these things, Sustes is a better name to go by, and that's spelled P-S-E-U-S-T-E-S. So if Google Scholar, you'll find stuff like that. There's actually a really good old Reptiles magazine article on Sustes postsolanatus that Ketzel Dwyer wrote, that I remember reading when I was a teenager, and was like, these things are so cool. That was right as they were kind of emerging on the US scene. But yeah, their taxonomy has been a bit of a mess. And like I said, I think it still needs a lot more work. The whole change with Polylepis now being sexcarinatus is a whole thing. And then on top of that, all of the Phrynonax that are coming in now from Suriname and Guyana are being labeled as Phrynonax poecilinatus, but they're actually Sex carinatus. So that makes it even more confusing. And that's kind of a bummer too, because, I hope that, folks aren't unintentionally hybridizing, which is totally possible at this point. So hopefully this podcast can get out there and help clarify some things for people. But I would say that if you are seeing wild caught Phrynonax coming in from South America, they're Sex carinatus. You're not going to see the poecilinatus coming in from there. And if you're seeing wild caught coming in from Nicaragua, there's a pretty high likelihood that they're that northern black and yellow species, and they're actually probably collected north of Nicaragua and coming in on a Nicaragua shipment. And that's as much as I'll say about that. But
so I guess the best piece of advice to give is, if you're someone getting into these species, and any of them, and you want to ensure that you're going down the right path, it's probably going to be good to reach out. If you're getting a hold of, if you're not buying directly from some of the names that were just mentioned. And I also put Kevin Pollack out there, as that's who I'm getting from as well. If you're not getting from some of those names, you may want to reach out and get a strong ID on what you have. Right. And while I know that it's often annoying to breeders to get messages, hey, I know you're into these snakes. I didn't buy this from you, but will you answer all of my questions now? But my guess is, since there are so few that are really working with these hardcore, they would rather take a minute to identify what you have than for you to unintentionally hybridize, as Roy's saying. So get a strong ID before you start pairing them.
Yeah, totally. And anyone that is curious about that stuff, message me. I'm totally happy to help with that kind of stuff. And I've looked at enough photos of these snakes at this point that I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at IDing them. And I'm laughing because I have friends who are constantly teasing me about that they're like, how the fuck do you know where that's from? They'll send me a picture and I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of the Mexican ones from the northern part of the range. And they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I've just looked at a lot of them.
It's amazing. But, what the eye can develop,
Yeah, totally. It's just a search image thing, it's pattern recognition.
For me, it's like when I was, would be driving somewhere with my dad, and that's a 68 blah, blah, blah car, whatever it is he's talking about.
My dad did.
How do you know that? Well, the headlight is up. Okay. That's how you know it's a 68, not a 67.
Yep.
Really?
Yep. So that's how I am with Phrynonax.
I love
nice.
It. I love
it. I wanted to do that taxonomic discussion because this is a species that's just kind of it's starting to ramp, and I do think it's important that before we just go a little bit insane and start pairing everything together, because we all know the horror stories from the past, and this isn't a whole cryptic species shift here, shift there kind of deal. Like, these are legit morpho species. Like, you can look at them and identify them, and we don't want to end up with our captive populations getting completely mixed up and heterozygous, or messed up. We'll leave it at messed up. So
exactly.
We don't want them known as hobby bird eating snakes.
Yes, we don't.
Ideally, if we could avoid it, it'd be cool. Yeah,
that's right.
So now we'll segue on to care, because this will be cool. So how do you want to do this, Roy? Do you want to start with a baby and then go up through adulthood, or do you want to just straight to adults? Or
let's go do adults, and then we'll talk babies, because the babies are kind of quirky.
All right, cool.
And we can talk about them with breeding a little bit.
So I am assuming that, given your style of keeping, that you're not putting these in a 70 quart tub and walking away.
I'm not. That's not my style. I think that there are people that do that and do it successfully, but yeah, the way that I keep them, I keep, like I said, pretty much everything is in a planted viv. I give them overhead lighting. They got the UV, they've got a halogen for basking. And
what UV percentage do you have on them?
Usually I go for a 6% Arcadia. Yeah, that seems to work fine. I'm sure you could even do something lower than that if desired, but they do actively bask. They're totally diurnal. And so I see mine out, basking every day, which is what another thing, in terms of what I like about the species. I love that they're diurnal and they're diurnally active and they're out in the open. That's great for me because I don't love working with stuff that I can't see. I'm pretty visual and I like to watch stuff. So, yeah, they're always out basking. I provide them a lot of branches, some kind of elevated hides, like cork rounds work really well for them, as like an elevated hiding area. You can kind of mount that up in the branches. And they will spend some time terrestrial as well. They'll hide on the ground. Sometimes they'll go under the leaf litter, even in the vivs that I put in there. It's pretty straightforward. In terms of like the light cycle photo period, I go for an equatorial photo period. So it's 12 on, 12 off. Pretty basic in that regard. The temperature gradient I aim for, the temperature gradient I aim for is kind of low 70s to mid 80s. And I think that this is a place where sometimes folks go wrong with them. I've noticed is they'll keep them a little bit too cool because they're used to more North American colubrids that like it a bit cooler. These guys, you really want to give them a good opportunity to get nice and warm. I provide, because I provide a halogen basking area in all my setups, like right underneath that halogen, it's like triple digits heat, it gets really hot, but it dissipates pretty quickly away from that. And so I would say if I'm going by kind of the ambient ranges, it's kind of mid to upper 80s on the warm end of my vivs, and then mid to low 70s on the cool end. And that seems to work really well for me. I don't have any feeding issues with my animals, and that's the sign that I usually I'm starting to notice from feedback from other folks. If they're having struggles feeding them, it's usually related to they're just keeping them a little bit too cool, and it kind of suppresses their appetite. So that's one thing I've noticed in terms of feeding them. They have a pretty good appetite. You can feed them on a weekly basis. I probably feed my adults a little bit less often than weekly, probably every 10 days or so, because I like to keep my animals a little bit leaner. And that seems to work great. They're great condition. Like I said before, the female lutched last year, which was great, and was telling me that she was, well conditioned to handle that. And the interesting thing with them is that they thrive on a diet of either you can do chick, kind of rodent thing, or in the case of mice,
Roy, you're kind of freezing up a little bit on us, and that was an important piece. I want to make sure everybody hears.
In the case of the adult Sex carinatus that I have, I've been feeding them exclusively eggs for a few years now. Yeah, and because that's what they want to eat. And originally when I first got them, they would eat eggs right away, really easily. Quail eggs, chicken eggs, didn't matter. Didn't matter if it was a chicken egg out of the fridge that I let sit until it was room temp.
Oh no. We've got a frozen
issues.
Roy.
You guys hear me?
Oh, yeah. Keep
Am I
freezing
back?
up on us a little bit.
Sorry, I don't know.
Quail eggs, chicken eggs, right out of the fridge that you let warm up. Oh, frozen again, Roy.
Tried to feed them. Can you guys hear me okay?
Now we can.
Oh, man. Yeah. Okay, now you can. Okay, so I tried to feed these Sex carinatus chicks, quail, small mice. I could get them to eat them, but I would have to tease feed the hell out of them, and it was just stressful. They didn't seem to enjoy it. I didn't really enjoy it. And so I just started giving them eggs. And, you know, I was like, okay, this is a huge part of their native diet. I know that. I'm sure they also consume nestling birds here and there, but I'm just going to give them a wide variety of eggs and see how they do. And we're 3 years into the experiment and they're thriving. So, it seems to work really well. And the nice thing with that is like, try and find an easier feeder than an egg. You know, it's like they're getting it kind of expensive, but they're still not rodent prices yet.
Okay.
But you know, it's like, it's just one of those things where it's nice to be like, okay, I'm in a pinch, I need to feed some snakes, I'm on my way out the door, I'll just go leave an egg, you know, and it's gone the next day. So that works really well with those guys. With my other species, so I currently have all three of the species that you see in herpetoculture in the US. I've got the black and yellows and the Costa Ricans as well. Although I'm actually shortly, I'll be moving my Costa Ricans elsewhere, just because I want to dedicate more to these other two species, which I think just need a little bit more coverage. But those guys all feed rodents, chicks, and eggs just because they are easier to accept all three of those things. And they'll drop feed, they'll tongue feed, and it's really nice and easy, thankfully, in that respect, as long as they're warm enough. Now, when it comes to the babies, feeding the babies can be a bit of a thing. And I know that a lot of people have spoken to this being a challenge with Poecilinatus. And I don't have a ton of experience with baby Poecilinatus. I haven't ever started baby Poecilinatus. I've received babies that were already started from somebody else and raised them up. But all 20 of the sex carinatus that I hatched last year ate frozen thawed pinkies right out of the egg. And there's a little bit of a technique to it. It's kind of funny, but works really well with Phrynonax, which is basically you take them out, you hold them in one hand, or you can kind of like slightly pin them with 5 or 6 inches of their body hanging out against a flat surface. And you kind of tease them a little bit with a frozen thawed pinky on tongs. They kind of strike at it a few times and they grab it. As soon as they hit that pinky on the head, they just start reflexively swallowing it and eat it right away. And and it takes a few tries of doing that with them kind of regularly, feeding them. And then eventually they'll just start tongue feeding. And they're pretty voracious. So all of my sex carinatus that I have remaining, I've sold a handful of them, but I have a bunch left here still because I'm terrible at promoting myself and listing things online, which I got to get better at. But they're really easy to feed off tongs. They're actually the easiest snakes I have to feed, which is really, really nice. Baby spilotes are a lot harder in my experience. So that's been a huge relief. And I'm again, I can't say that will translate exactly to Poecilinatus and these northern as well, but I think it likely would, again, as long as they're kept warm enough. So for those who are, go ahead.
I heard of the tease feeding, with this species, before, and that's kind of the golden trick on it. Did you try any scenting, anything to see if they would take on their own without the teasing? Okay, I'm just curious.
I didn't. I haven't yet, and I'm sure that if you could get finch eggs, they would take those on their own. But
I don't know which of the species that this was. I have to ask, but I know that I saw videos that Matt Most posted quite a while back of boiled eggs. He took scrambled eggs and chopped it up, put it in there, and they were just going to town on it. And so I was just wondering if maybe that's what they wanted to start off with.
So this is something that I haven't tried yet, but I'm going to try shortly because I was actually just talking to somebody who has purchased a couple of Spilotes sulphureus from me named Tim Frison. He asked me, he just texted me one day. He's like, Roy, have you ever tried giving your baby Spilotes boiled eggs. And I was like, no, I've never tried, but it'd be worth a shot for sure. He texted me like an hour later and he's like, they're like trying to lap up the residue of the boiled egg out of the cup I put it in. You know, like they really went for it. So I think that would be a great thing to try. I haven't tried it yet, but I need to do that. My sweetheart actually, as we're talking, is on her way to go get eggs from our neighbor. So I'll boil some and try that next.
There you go.
But yeah, I think that that would be a great thing to try for kind of drop feeding without having to do the teasing. I just went straight to the teasing because I know that has worked. I've actually started sulfureous in that same manner, although they're a little bit more finicky with it than the Phrynonax are. And I know that most people that are buying them are going to want to be able to feed them pinkies, right? And so that's what I start them on. But
I just kind of look at it as every episode we talk about how busy we are and all the things that we're doing, but I'd be shocked, everyone. I'm actually a very lazy dude. I'd rather do as little as I have, as I have to. And so for me, I almost look at it as if I can get them to eat boiled eggs, I can drop a frozen thawed pinky in the middle of those boiled eggs. Yep. And, it's just like getting rhinos, to take or a range rat to take pinkies with, putting them in a little bit of water that's got, rosy reds in it.
Yep.
So that's, and I asked just simply because, with getting some in, it's like, okay, here's some thoughts.
Yeah.
On, do you think this would work? Is this
I think it would. Yeah. I think it's worth doing for sure. They love eggs. Like I said, I mean, my adults, I've given them dove eggs, pigeon eggs, pheasant eggs, quail, chicken. They'll eat all of them. And a chicken egg is like, it seems like it would be too large of a meal for my adult Sex carinatus. Like they're not big snakes by any means, but they can really expand, almost like an egg eating snake to accommodate a large size egg, which is pretty impressive. So
do they digest the shell or do they regurgitate?
They regurgitate.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Quick question. So the other species that you're keeping, are you feeding those also an egg-only diet, or like do you try to feed them chicks?
I feed those guys a more varied diet.
Okay.
Just because they accept a more varied diet easier. Sure. Like I said, I would feed the Sex carinatus chicks and mice and stuff like that if they wanted them. But like literally, it's funny. I'll drop feed. I use these seed pods as kind of faux nests. And so I'll put the eggs in those and I'll put a chicken with the eggs. They'll eat the eggs and they'll leave the chick. I'm like, what's the deal? So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to let you guys do your thing. Something I don't. And but with the others, the Costa Ricans and then the Northerns, the black and yellows, they'll take anything so far. So I do give them eggs, but I also give them chicks and rodents in addition to that.
Sweet. So in addition to the diet, do you set the babies up in a naturalistic setup, or are they in? So what's that look like?
So for anyone who's actually viewing this on the YouTube or whatever later, you can actually see that is how I have the babies set up right there. And these are all a bunch of baby Sex carinatus just chilling right here. And so basically I have these condo setups by Tamura Designs. And each little unit in the condo, I have some that are 12 by 18 by 18, and then I have some that are 16 by 18 by 18. And basically I just I put in some manzanita branches, some little twiggy branches, which thankfully I have an abundance of because there's a lot of manzanita in my yard. And then I put in some fast growing viney plants. And in this case, I'm using Begonia glabra, which for those people that have ever kept in a viv, they'll know Begonia glabra will take over a viv, and it will. It basically grows like a weed, but it's great because it's a really good climbing plant. It also shingles, so it can climb up surfaces really well. And it just creates a lot of surface area and a lot of texture in there for the snakes. And I actually don't even use hides or anything in these condos for them at all. There's no cork or anything for them to hide in. They just hide in the foliage, and they do great. I raise the babies together, cohabitated. I usually separate out the sexes just so I know which ones are which, but they don't have any cannibalistic tendencies whatsoever. And they cohabitate really well. My adults also, I should say, are cohabitated across all the different species. There's never been any issues with cannibalism in my experience. And yeah, the babies, they do same as the adults. They have like a little halogen. I use like a nano halogen fixture, like one of the Zoom Ed nano halogen ones with like a 25 watt halogen bulb. So super low wattage. But that basically achieves that same gradient that I get in the big enclosures is achievable even in these small enclosures, because it's just a small bulb. And so they can get up nice and hot if they want to right under that halogen, and they will go up there and bask, especially when they're digesting. But a lot of the time they're just kind of hanging out in kind of the mid range of the little condos, and it's probably in the kind of mid 80s most of the time in there.
How often do you see the little guys together? Do they hang out together, or are they just kind of usually in their own space?
Half and half, I would say. They're most of the time they're together. They're hanging out together. Yeah. But like right now I'm literally looking over and there's 4 of them piled on top of each other. And literally I've seen them with 4 of them with their heads piled up like this, stacked on each other.
We've covered papers where, there's a lot of evidence pointing towards some kind of gregarity or altruism being a snaky thing. And I think it might get exaggerated when we have them in human care.
Right.
I don't think in the Guiana Shield, with all the heterogeneity in that forest, that the baby sex carinatus are like all, but I don't think that these perceived negative elements of cohabbing, I'm just not seeing it. So like you did the thing with your camera, I'm going to do it now. You're a trendsetter, Roy. This tank right here is where I have the Clark eye, the Nerodia Clark eye. The light's off because it's nighttime.
Nice.
But they're always in a pile. And if you read those papers that talk about that, like it's almost like a "you're okay, I'm okay, we're okay" kind of thing. We're going to start doing some experiments with that this year. I'm going to raise some falsies together. Now, falsies together is a bit of a nightmare. I'm certain a false water cobra keeper was like, "What you doing, fool?" Because you throw one prey item in there and it's on. But at the same time, this is something that I'm really, really curious about, because I think all of us have cohabbed, and I just don't. I'm not on team like, "Ooh, I've got 7 7-foot snakes. They're all going to live in one cage, so I can have 7 7-foot snakes." That's not what I'm talking about here.
Right.
But I've just noticed, like, scientists look for patterns, and they're together. And at first I was like, all right, it's a dominance thing. Like, there's some resource there, and the other one is there because they're trying to eke out for their existence. But I don't. That's not really what I'm seeing in the animals that I'm cohabbing. It almost feels like it's a "you okay, I'm okay, we're okay" kind of thing.
Totally. I agree with that. And I also cohabitate my adult Spilotes sulphureus, and it's the same thing. And they actually, I very specifically, when I designed their setup, I also made it so that they could, there was as much resource abundance and separation as possible. So they actually have 3 separate basking areas within this big viv. And very often they're together, sharing one, or if they're hiding, they're sharing the same cork tube, even though there's multiple others around that they can use. And so there's definitely something to it, I think. And it's the same with the sex carinatus. Like my adult pair, they're pretty much always hiding together. And actually, even when the female went in the nest box and laid her eggs, the male was hanging out with her in the nest box. So if you go on my Instagram, there's a video I have of checking the nest box, and you'll see that both of them are coiled up together, and the female's got her clutch there as well. But it's pretty cool to see that. And again, like just no aggression whatsoever, no cannibalism. I think you asked me earlier kind of what's a good parallel in terms of North American species. And I kind of think of them as almost like in some ways similar to kind of Eastern rats.
Yep. That's what I've always thought.
Yeah. Really similar niche space, I think.
Yeah.
And even similar metabolism. I think these guys probably have a slightly faster metabolism, which tracks with them being just in a generally warmer area. But I think that they're very, very similar actually in terms of their niche space and kind of vibes.
The fancy tropical form.
Yeah.
Our black rats are like blue collar rat form. Right?
Yeah.
So I have a quick question about the babies. So, you mentioned the adults that the males have the keeled scales versus, the females that, very sexually dimorphic there.
Yeah.
Your babies, are you popping your babies, probing your babies, or is there some other way that you're sexing them?
I'm doing popping for the babies. That's what I found to be easiest. They're too small to probe comfortably for me.
Same.
And so popping seems to work great. And they're super easy to sex in that way. I wish that the babies had the keels, right out of the egg. That would be so cool. But they develop the keels later on, it seems like. And that's actually kind of like one of the secondary characteristics that show, I think, that they're actually sexually mature too, is that if the males start to develop those really heavy keels, he's of age, so to speak. But it seems like they reach maturity in like 3 to 4 years on average. I think there people out there who could probably try and power feed them and get them to get big enough to breed at 2 or 3, but I think 3 to 4 seems to be a better metric in my experience for pairing them. With the Sexcernotus, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that kind of rings true with more colubrids than we like to admit.
Yep.
Like,
Totally.
I remember when young, I would always hear 2 years.
Yep.
But that's also when corn snakes were the dominant species that everybody was comparing everything to. But even then, I mean, you can have a corn snake ready in 2 years, but 3's better. 3's better. And I'm even finding, even with like black rat snakes, year 4 is better than year 3. So I think that, with a lot of species, it's one of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's better to just give them time to mature and fill out. And it's like I didn't even necessarily set out. I didn't really do anything special to breed the Sexcernotus that I got. The kind of story with me getting those snakes in general is kind of a funny one, because I didn't plan to start working with them. But what happened was, you guys will both know Ashley DeZan from Northern Lights, and also Brittany Williams from Ivory Exotics. Brittany is one of my best friends. We chat all the time. And she had just gotten in an order from Underground Reptiles of some Chironeus scurrilus, which are the rusty whip snakes, or sometimes they're called smooth machete savane, is like one of the trade names for them. And they were snakes that she was going to send to Ashley, because Ashley was working on a project with those. And one of the snakes that arrived was a weirdo. Like, it just didn't look right. It wasn't quite right. And so Brittany messaged me a photo of this snake and was like, "What is this? Like, this isn't a Chironeus, is it?" And I was like, "That's a Phrynonax, but like, I've never seen one that looks like that." Because again, this is not a snake that you could normally confuse for a Chironeus scurrilus at all. Usually they're olive green, and you're talking about a snake that is solid bright red. And what was really funny is that I on Instagram, I follow some of the folks in Suriname and Guyana who export to Underground and to other distributors in the US. And one of them had posted a picture of this very exact snake a couple months prior to that. it as a Chironeus. And I saw the picture on Instagram and I was like, that is a Phrynonax. Like that's not a Chironeus, but that is I've never seen one that looks like that. That is a crazy looking snake. So it shows up there, and then you know, this whole thing happens. I go, yeah, it's a Phrynonax, and then eventually the conversation got around to, well, do you want it? Because Ashley doesn't need it, and I was like, yes, absolutely. So they send it to me, and then it took a while to find a female because though these snakes do come in every once in a while from Suriname shipments, they're not common by any means. I'd say the Spilotes come in a lot more frequently than these guys do. So it took about a year to get a female. And then it took, you know, on top of that, another year and a half or so to get them fully, both of them settled in together. And then I noticed the female's looking really heavy. And she, like I said, she laid a clutch. The first clutch she laid was 11 eggs. The second one was 9 eggs, both all fertile. And I incubated the eggs right around the standard kind of 80 degrees. I usually do a night drop to like 78.5 on my stuff. And they all hatched right at about 90 days, if I remember correctly, 90 or 100. So kind of an interesting origin story with those guys showing up that way. And, with that one male that, you know, Max shared some video with for people on the YouTube, but
very cool. So where did the female come from? Like
she was from another.
How did you know that's you know, that's what I need?
Yeah. So she came in. I found her on Morph Market actually, but it was another importer. And they just had this one random odd female, and I knew it was a Sex carinatus because I was already familiar with the species, but like I said, I had never seen a red one. And even now, it's like if you go on Google or iNaturalist, anything like that, and you look, you're not gonna find pictures of any that look like the male that I have. He's just something special. So he's just an unusual example of the species. But I knew that he was a Sex carinatus because I knew where he was collected. I knew that he was within range for Sex carinatus, all of that stuff. But so yeah, when the female came in, she was I don't remember which of the kind of importers it was now, but there's actually, like I said, there's Underground occasionally has them, and a couple of the other kind of big importers occasionally have them. But
so with the adults, one thing I don't remember you saying, what size enclosure are they in?
So I've got my adult Sex carinatus in a 4 by 2 by 4 right now. But that said, I feel like they may as well be in a 4 by 2 by 2 because they don't really utilize the lower half of that enclosure at all. They're pretty highly arboreal. Occasionally the female will go down to the ground again and kind of root around in the leaf litter, especially when she's in shed. She'll kind of go and hide under the leaf litter, where I think it's just, you know, moister down there. But I think a 4 by 2 by 2 would work for those guys. Or down the road, I'm going to be building a bunch of my own enclosures, and I think what I'm going to build for them is going to be like a 5 by 2 by 3. So it gives them a little bit more width of the enclosure, a little bit less height, because I think that, you know, 3 feet is plenty of height, but even 2 feet would be fine. You know, as long as you give them, against how you utilize that space, if you give them lots of branches, a lot of climbing ability, they're going to use it. They definitely are highly arboreal. So, that seems to work really well. My juveniles that I have of the other species are in the larger condo setups I have right now, which are basically like an 18-inch cube. And those guys are all right around the 2 foot size right now, 2 foot long, maybe a little bit smaller than that. And that seems to be working great for them right now, but I'm going to upgrade them pretty soon. And they're probably, my goal is to have a pair of each of the common species in like a 5 by 2 by 3 down the road.
Very cool.
Very nice. Yeah.
And they make for like, you know, again, for people that are, you know, wanting something diurnal, like a good display snake, this is a great species for that, in my opinion. They do really well in a planted viv. They're not like hyperactive in the sense that I've never seen them like glass surfing or nose rubbing or anything like that ever. They're pretty sedate and mellow, but if you want something where it's like you walk in your reptile room and you look over and there's a cool looking colubrid just draped in the branches basking, like these are your snakes. They're absolutely that kind of snake. And it's just a pleasure to observe and keep in that way.
Now, you said that you're cohabiting them in pairs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever attempted cohabiting in a trio or anything like that?
I haven't, but I'm sure it would work. I would actually like to get a couple more of the Sex carinatus, just because, again, there's just not, I don't know of anyone else really working with that species right now. Mm-hmm. And you never know when they're just not going to show up anymore, when Suriname or Guyana closes, and then that's that. So I'd love to get a couple more of those guys. And I think I might try and keep a trio down the road if I can find another healthy female, but I'm sure it would work.
Gotcha.
So do you see now, because you're probably one of the few people that's keeping all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Minus the cryptic species we don't know about, but
right. Yeah.
Are there any quirks amongst them where this species does this, where these don't do this, or these two do this, but that one doesn't do this? Or is it basically, if you're keeping a Phrynonax, you're keeping a Phrynonax?
It seems like more the latter. They seem pretty similar across the board for me. I haven't noticed a ton of difference. They're pretty simple and similar in terms of the care. I have noticed that the Costa Ricans seem to be the largest on average. Like I'll see Costa Ricans that pretty regularly get to 7 foot mark. I haven't seen that yet from the other two species. The northerns, the black and yellows, I haven't seen them that big. And I also haven't seen a Sex carinatus that big. That said, I'm not saying they don't get that big, because I just haven't seen it. It's possible, but like literally the only 2 Sex carinatus adults I've seen are the pair that I have. And they don't seem to be growing rapidly at this point. They're both around probably 5, maybe 6 feet, but somewhat slender. And I don't see them, in the active growth stage still. When I got both of them, they were significantly smaller than they are now. And they were growing pretty rapidly then, but at this point they seem to have slowed down. They're kind of adult size, and it seems between 5 to 6 feet is what I expect from that species. I have heard from a couple of people that the northerns, the black and yellows, can get pretty big as well, but I haven't. They haven't given me like a number necessarily of how big that is, so I don't exactly know what that means.
Cool.
Yeah.
So have you bred any of the species besides Sex carinatus?
Well, yes and no. So I actually bred the black and yellows when I was a teenager. That was cool. The first species I bred. I had a pair. They were from Guatemala, and I actually traded a pair of those for a pair of the Spiloti sulphureus that I hatched. That was part of that same clutch that Handsome Boy was from. And so I bred those, I got eggs, and then that was right around the time everything kind of went to hell for me and I had to get out of herpetoculture. So I had to ditch the eggs, which is kind of a heartbreaker. But so I haven't hatched the other ones yet. And right now, so I don't have a female northern here yet. I actually, a friend of mine, Chris Sharp, you guys know him. Yeah. He has a female northern that he's going to be giving to me to pair with my male. And then of the 2 pairs of the Costa Ricans that I have right now, neither of them are quite mature yet. I think that one pair will be ready to go this year, but like I said earlier, I'm actually going to be moving the Costa Ricans for the time being, because I have limited space, and I want to focus on these other 2 species more, because I feel like they just need a little bit more attention than the Costa Ricans do. Okay.
So with the breeding of the Sex carinatus, did you do anything, or is it just literally
exact question?
Yeah.
I've got eggs kind of thing.
So I would say a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I didn't intentionally do much. That said, they're on the same misting system as my sulfureus and everything in that room. And I do adjust the misting cycle for that room every 3 months. So I kind of go through, I have like a routine, basically like a calendar that I did where it tells me when to adjust the misting cycles to basically ramp up to like a wet season and then ramp down to a dry season.
That's pretty cool.
And I alternate that 3 months on, 3 months off for everything in that room. And I think that that's a big factor in breeding those species, anything from the Guyana shield, because that's the big shift that's happening down there. You know, there's no photoperiod change. There's not really very much of a significant temperature change. But I think that wet season, dry season is a big factor. And then I think the corresponding abundance of food or lack thereof is the factor. And so that said, I didn't ramp up their feeding or ramp it down with the Phrynonax, I think they responded to the misting cycle and just generally being well conditioned enough to breed. And it was actually a surprise for me when the female double clutched, because I'm so used to the sulfureus, which they don't really do that, at least not that I'm aware of. And but then, you know, after the first clutch, I gave her a couple of eggs, just chicken eggs, and she recovered her reserves, I guess, enough to throw another 9 eggs, you know,
Wow.
a couple months later. So that was pretty impressive.
This is eggs. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was kind of like, oh, wait, because at one point she went back into the blue and I was looking at her and she looks pretty thick. And I was like, oh God, maybe she's going to double clutch. Again, most of the species that I keep don't do that. So it just wasn't really on my mind until it was happening. But yeah, the clutch on the screen right now that Max has brought up for us is that's the second clutch.
When I was working on the book, reading everything I could on every South American snake, even non-dipsadids, there's just so many species of snake in South America that if they, you get that pulse of resources once the rainy season starts. And then they breed before that, the sperm's waiting there. And then they ovulate with the food. They get fertilized. They drop an egg. And then, like, if that season extends a little bit, they just do the retained sperm bit. Mm-hmm. But I see it. Every single one of the dipsadids covered in the book does that. I mean, we know that tricolor hogs do that. But the falsies, like, double clutching for those false water cobras, it happens in nature. Like it's not pushing the females, which a lot of people think you're pushing them too much. They retain sperm in human care. Everything's perfect. They're getting food. We're feeding them. And they've evolved that if we have a year like that, we're going to drop because we don't know if the next year it's going to be dry. So that's how you end up as Zac Loughman producing 60 freaking eggs out of a single female false water cobra. And oh, by the way, the one over there made 60 eggs, and the one over there made 60 eggs. So that
honestly sounds like a nightmare to me. It isn't. Croak.
Well, I wouldn't be able to hold it. I wouldn't be able to do it.
I'd be so stressed.
Yes, no. But as a scientist, though, I'm like robust sample sizes. So
totally. That's awesome.
As a herpetoculturalist, I'm like, I just crashed the market.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see if the Dorbignii do that.
So when Zac has those, you know how everybody has that like garbage disposal snake in your room where, well, see, that's kind of how Zac treats me now. Yeah, all the extra babies he produces.
Yep,
is I become that garbage disposal that he just, you know what, Clint can feed these.
Yeah, there you go.
Clint is my king snake.
We all wish we had that friend in herpetoculture, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
Anywho.
But I was just gonna say something about these guys. Oh, one thing I just wanted to touch on a little bit is morph stuff. So
sure, go for it.
There's not a lot of morphs that I'm aware of within Phrynonax in herpetoculture, apart from this red male that I have that does seem to be some sort of morph. I think that he is actually a morph and not just a polymorphic expression, if that makes sense, especially given how the babies, even going through an ontogenetic color change, they were still really obviously two distinct color phases right out of the egg, which you can see on the screen right now. That top one is obviously a red and the other one's obviously a green. So there's that, but I have noticed through like geeking out about them online, I have seen a melanistic sex carinatus that was completely black, including its stomach and its eyes, just jet black, which was really cool. And that was in Western, or that was in Eastern Peru, I believe. So a totally different part of their range, but something kind of interesting there. Another thing that I've noticed is that if you go, for anyone who's interested in these guys, and I told you to look at Shropshire, that's that species we don't have. If you go on iNaturalist and look at those guys, you'll notice that there are some of them, most of them are going to be black and yellow, but there are a handful that stand out that will be orange and black. If you go and look at these the orange and black ones closely, you'll notice that mixed in with the orange and black, there will be some random white scales. And the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, it looks like it's the white scales seem to be isolated along the spine primarily. And so I thought maybe it was a scar. And then I went and I was like, I want to go look at the other orange ones. And I did. And I noticed that all of them have these white scales. So I think that is actually like a calico or piebald morph, basically, that is naturally occurring. Which is kind of interesting. So there's definitely some sort of morph, potential for people who are interested in that within these snakes. They do naturally occur. But there's, in a way, it's like you don't really need it because, especially like with the Costa Rican Poecilonatus, they are so incredibly polymorphic where you can get, kind of lavender colored snakes. You can get these gunmetal gray and yellow snakes. You can get gunmetal gray and red or orange. And then if you get the black and yellows and the further north species, those guys can have a range of expressions where they can be kind of either striped formed, where they're black with like kind of a yellow speckling, almost striping, like the striped spilotes that exist out there, or they can even have yellow banding that occurs occasionally. So there's a lot of variability in the snakes just naturally, which is again really cool. And up to this point, there hasn't been a lot of clarity about how those traits are inherited because a bunch of different phenotypes will occur within one clutch and one pairing. But I know that John at Palm Beach Colubrid is starting to kind of narrow those things down a little bit and have a little bit more consistency in actually line breeding for certain color types, basically, with his Costa Rican Poecilonatus.
Cool.
Yeah.
Man. Calico. See, that's
they're
like
awesome. I'm gonna send this to you guys in the chat really quick, so you can see it at least. Maybe Max can bring it up too.
Grab it and throw it up for us.
Grab it.
I'll tell you, until bringing you on, I had no idea that there were any kind of color morphs out there in this these animals. So
yeah. Well, like I said, this red male that I got that showed up was the first time that I had really seen that. And again, normally I'm not that interested in morphs. That's just not really something that I get stoked about typically. But in the case of this snake, it's like you go from a snake that's usually kind of an olive green color to being solid bright red. It's like, okay, that's cool. It's like it stands out. So I think I just sent you guys a couple of the different Shropshire eyes that have that orange with the white speckling on it. That's super unusual, but they are really cool snakes. We need to get those at some point. I don't know how it's going to happen.
Gosh, these are
Someone's
normally
breed them a couple generations.
Oh, sorry about that. I was going to say, normally when we're looking at pictures, I like to give a description for those that can't see listening to us on Spotify. Yeah. This is difficult. To compare to anything else. I mean, I guess the closest thing that I could compare it to is if you know what like a coach whip looks like. Mm-hmm. It's going to be along that kind of feel, but still different. Still so different. Now it's funny. There's this two-tone up near the neck and the head of what we're looking at right now,
Yeah.
where the coloration from the I guess towards the belly comes up to almost halfway, and then suddenly changes with this different color on the top half of the head, and down maybe about, let's just say, a third of the body. That almost reminds me of a queen snake.
Yeah.
The way that they have the same coloration on the sides. So just if you're familiar with those species, that may help you kind of visualize a little bit of what this looks like if you're not familiar with it.
Very cool.
Hey, Max, can you hit the arrow to the next picture in this same image? So there you can see a pair that seems to be trying to breed, where you've got the normal Shropshire eye that's black and yellow, and then you've got this weird calico orange, white, black one as well. So they're
is this like a Tuesday night for you?
Yes. This is what I do. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
But this is more like a 7 a.m. with my first cup of coffee. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, they're incredible snakes.
Anyway. Very neat.
Yeah. So yeah, anything else you guys want to hear about Phrynonax? I mean, I don't know if we covered it, but
I think we did, and we did great. I mean, this is again a species that, as Zac had mentioned, we've had a lot of requests for. It's a species that I've been interested. Honestly, it was probably 4 years ago, maybe longer, that I was at a Tinley, and I was so close to pulling the trigger with Jason Hood on getting a couple. And when he said something about the tease feeding, I go, no, never mind. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't have the time for that.
No, that's the thing for me too.
Totally.
Yeah, but
and it's different for me because I don't have hundreds of babies to deal with every year. I have, the other day I thought out 55 pinkies, and that was like a record for me the other day. So
that'll
a little different.
Yeah,
I know. I have a different thing going on in that respect.
Yeah, well, and this was before Metazotics. It's still just the whole time. I just didn't want to devote that much time, but I do feel that, like the egg trick we were talking about earlier, because I'm a big proponent of scenting if need be, or feeding them what they want, 100%. Don't get me wrong, tease feeding has its place in herpetoculture for sure, and I'm not like anti. It's just I'd rather be able to put it in there and walk away.
I fully agree with that. Yeah, and like I said earlier, it's like I think if you had like a good source of finch eggs, you would be able to do that really easily. But maybe this boiled egg thing will work. I'll follow up with you on. I'll experiment here with my Sexcarin Otis and see what they do, and I'd also be curious to hear what you find out with this group you're getting from.
Yeah, well, and the 5 I've got coming in, I think 3 of them are taking pinkies, and 2 of them, or this is vice versa, are taking pinks with like some chick down or quail down, on them. And so I'm thinking the eggs will probably work too. And that's really why I was like, okay, I'll take those 5, because I don't mind having to do a little scenting or a little trick, but when he said, it's not have to tease, I'm like, fantastic.
That's great.
But that was another reason I was so excited that we could do this episode right now. It's because they get here tomorrow. So I get to have this conversation tonight.
Yes, I love it.
So really great timing, and certainly appreciate it. Going in that depth on such a cool species. So
my pleasure.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I love these snakes. They're really among my favorites. So I appreciate the opportunity to nerd out about them with you guys.
Well, and I love knowing that they are in the hands of some of the people that they are in the hands of, because you're like, Roy, you're making them a priority. And with them being so scarce over here in the U.S., and to your point earlier, it's, all it takes is these countries saying no more, and then that's it. So, knowing that we'll be able to, propagate and have more available, in years to come. I like knowing who's got them. So
they're worth keeping around for sure. They're really unusual and engaging snakes to work with. So hopefully we can keep them around.
Yeah. So with that being said, if you've gotten to this point, This was mostly Sex carinatus, but mostly Lotus, bloody blah.
Yeah.
Roy's got him, and he's
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
hit up Roy.
People want some. I've got reds and I've got greens of the Sex carinatus. So if anyone's interested, send me a message. They're really cool. Happy to geek out about them some more. And also, hopefully here shortly, I'm going to be publishing an article on my website about these guys, just kind of going over everything we just did, but in a kind of written format, and getting that out there too. Because I also, if I'm ever producing something, I want to be able to direct people to some quality resources about it. And there's just nothing to direct people to right now about these guys. So I got to just do it.
There you go. We like that attitude.
Absolutely.
That's our attitude. Okay. So with that being said, thank you, Roy. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they're interested?
Yeah. So Instagram is good. There I'm at Wellspring Herp, or Facebook, just my name, Roy Blodgett, Roy Arthur Blodgett. I also have a Wellspring Herpetoculture page on Facebook, but I'm pretty easy to find. And like I said, happy to answer any questions. If people are curious about what they have, if they've got a Phrynonax, they're not sure which of these types it is, hit me up. I'm happy to help. So
awesome. Okay, Clint, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Clint Bartley, or Metazotics, Instagram, MetazoticsLLC. Please check us out online. The website is metazotics.com. And if you want to email, it's metazotics@gmail.com.
Yeah. Okay. If you're interested in graduate school, or you're in high school and thinking about a place to go for undergrad and you like snakes, the least amount of snakes we have at West Liberty at any one point in time is about 200. And this year, I know because of my keeping staff, I think it blimped up to about 450. So, not insane numbers by some people's standards, but going to school and taking a class with a 7-foot water monitor in the classroom with you, if you're a herp nerd, it really doesn't get better than that. So please think about West Liberty University. I literally met today with the recruiting team at the university and basically said, I kind of have the corner on the snake market for undergrads. And they just kind of looked at me, but I'm happy for that. And you want to work with snakes while you're in college, hit us up. So we can set up a tour. We can set up you talking with me. I will talk to anybody. And then in grad school, we are accepting applications. Graduate assistantships have been given out for this year, but we do offer this online degree. And I spoke with a wonderful guy the other night. Will remain nameless for now. Who's thinking about doing a career change, and there's never a wrong time to do that. And I am happy to help people, become a herpetologist or become a herpetoculturalist. That's professional level. So there you go. Hit me up for that. And you can do that by messaging me at Zac Loughman on Facebook, Dr. Crawdad on Instagram, or emailing me at zloughman@westliberty.edu. Also, I'm not sure when we did this last, but I want to make sure we do it because we're proud of it. Proud members of the Morelia Python Radio Network. Eric puts up with us a lot. There's 3 of us because we have our tech wizard behind the scenes, who oftentimes is keeping the 2 of us in line with everything that's going on. So it's a
lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a team effort here. Max is our keeper. But anyway, but then there'll be days where we don't talk to each other and Clint nudges Eric, then I nudge Eric, then Max nudges Eric all in the same hour because we're all thinking the same thing. So thank you for putting up with us, bud. And we're proud to be a member of the Morelia Python Radio Network. And then finally, if you're on YouTube and you made it to this point, I never in a million years thought that I was going to say this out loud. And there are students that will make vicious fun of me for what I'm about to say. But please subscribe to this channel. We're trying to get our algorithm to pick up. It's not a like button, so I can't say smash that like button. Or maybe it is, and I'm too old to realize it. But do whatever you got to do to support us with just a little click. That would be great. Okay.
You know, I'd like to add, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, if you leave us a review, that helps a lot too. You know, if we want that 5-star, I guess. If you can do that, it goes a long way. It does bump the podcast up for new listeners. It makes it easier for them to find, even if they're not looking for it. So any help certainly helps us, and we appreciate you for it.
Yes. Max has just messaged us. I'm going to say it. Smash that subscribe button. There you go.
You just got so cool, Zach.
I did, man. I got a PhD to make that statement.
Shout out to Max.
Anyway, so with that being said, be it morning, afternoon, evening, or night, whatever time of day it is, thank you for giving us that time, and we'll catch you again later.